every time.
Kim Kardashian popped up on my For You page and pissed me the fuck off.
She could not go to law school.
Doing a performative bit.
We are witnessing the death of celebrity culture, and I'm going to be breaking down some actual statistics from a marketing and sales perspective that actually back this up, as well as some of my anecdotal experience. And my name is Toby. I go by Oga99 across these different platforms, but overall, I do a lot of marketing and sales for companies, their digital marketing. I build their sales funnels, their advertising. I've managed millions of dollars in ad spend. I've worked with creators with millions of followers in various industries, and I've helped them generate revenue, coaches, DJs, musicians, whatever, you name it. But one of the most important statistics that people tend to completely forget when it comes to this new economy that we're in is that there's a change in people's trust with online brands, especially Gen Z. Gen Z has the capability to influence trends, and there's a statistic that I can bring up in terms of right around 30 or even 50% of household purchases are being influenced by Gen Z. And a lot of Gen Z is purchasing things based off of online activity, TikTok, Pinterest, whatever, and Gen Z tends to have less loyalty than other generations based on, loyalty reward programs, overall values, the capability for that brand to be much more hip and up to date in its marketing. So if a brand has unique and creative marketing angles, they're much more likely to buy from that brand. I think it's anywhere from 7 to 10% more likely than other generations to buy strictly from a brand that has cooler marketing, right? That's why you see the rise of liquid death, because Gen Z genuinely just wants new, refreshing things. You could sell the same exact thing as long as it's refreshing and a new perspective, but that's a separate perspective or a separate point from how the death of celebrity culture is starting to come into fruition. And one of the main statistics is that right around 20% of consumers actually made a purchase based on a celebrity, a traditional media celebrity, right? And what now people are starting to do is that more commercials are starting to become less effective if they put a celebrity in the commercial, even in the ads themselves. They're still effective, but the overall ROI based on a source from World's Metrics was right around $3 for every dollar spent. And what we're now starting to see is the rise of influencer marketing. So influencer marketing in general is much more profitable. There's different segments of influencer marketing. There's, the bigger influencers, which tend to not be as profitable because sometimes they're faking their audience. They have a whole bunch of, bots and spam that are counted in their views. But what's a very valuable thing that especially any business owner can take away from the influencer marketing space and the shift towards Gen Z starting to buy from influencers is that micro influencers actually have a massive, massive impact on people's trust. Myself, I would be considered a micro influencer. There's tons of micro influencers, even that I follow, compared to bigger influencers, and they have much more engagement. One, because it feels more community oriented. They aren't necessarily always focused on monetization. It's usually people who are very passionate, but the ROI for those campaigns is much higher. And in general, what people found is for influencer marketing compared to celebrity marketing, they started to see 3x ROIs for celebrity marketing, but when they had an ROI on a influencer marketing campaign in general, it was right around a 6.5x ROI for influencer marketing. And within that, more and more engagement is actually coming from micro or nano influencers. These are people with 1 to 10K, 50K, and across the board, just based on different metrics from influencer marketing benchmark reports, you start to see the engagement rate of nano influencers skyrocket. These are people with 1,000 followers, 10,000 followers. If they post something that gets 1,000 views, they'll get 100 likes, like a 10% like ratio, especially on TikTok. But larger influencers will only get a 5% engagement rate, a 7% engagement rate. On top of that, the discoverability has become decentralized. So all the people with these large followings, in order for them to succeed, there's a separate thing that they can do, which is called clipping, and just increase the distribution of their content across multiple accounts, which is extremely effective because sometimes if you have one account, you're basically gambling your reach on that one particular account. But if you have multiple sub accounts and repurpose your content, split test different hooks, text headlines, just like you're trying to scale an advertising campaign on Facebook, but with organic content, it is extremely powerful. But overall, micro influencers, they drive a much higher engagement rate. And these larger celebrities, people are starting to realize that they don't have the same amount of influence as an influencer. So the influencer economy and the creator economy, in a sense, is starting to replace traditional celebrities. So celebrities aren't dead, literally, but they're shifting to more relatable influencers, especially nano and micro influencers, because again, Gen Z's really primarily focused on trust, relatability, shared values. And in a sense, if you don't have that authenticity, relatability, all of those different buzzwords, you're much more likely not to get the same level of conversion or engagement than someone else, because those people you're all competing for eyeballs. If someone else is being vulnerable, if another influencer is being authentic and you're not, you have to really have a massive brand to stand out. And Gen Z, again, is starting to give their capital, their money, their purchasing power and attention to new and up and coming people. Just because of the For You page phenomenon, you can find a new influencer or a new girl or a new guy on your For You page that has a unique angle or a unique take. You don't have to follow the people that have been around for 20, 30 years that came up in a traditional, media sense. And that kind of ties into some other statistics that a lot of Gen Z, and primarily Gen Z, right around 40 to 50%, make a purchasing decision based off of influencers. So people are correct when they say that influencers do influence, like, because people genuinely look up to these people. And that's why I believe micro influencers are actually going to be the future. There's probably going to be a whole bunch of SaaS platforms and startups that start to build around micro influencers, because even just in TikTok itself and Instagram and all these other platforms, they're trying to make it more accessible for brand deals to happen on the platform versus off platform, because they all just want as much control and data as possible. And just year over year, more and more of Gen Z is starting to trust influencers and even micro influencers before they make a purchasing decision. And that, compared to the fact that Gen Z is also responsible for nearly 30 or 50% of some of the household purchases, is extremely important from branding strategy. So if you run a brand or you built a brand, you're going to start to see that, for example, Gen Z is actually leading your sales, even if they're not the ones directly purchasing it. And I have a crazy story of this, because I used to work at a restaurant with me and my friend, and we would do the marketing, and we were working on a campaign just to kind of get feedback with the employees, understand how we can make the restaurant more marketable. And we sat in the restaurants for days, not days, the entire day. And for hours, we just sat down, took out a pen and paper, and looked at the type of people who were coming in, and really just did an in-depth analysis in terms of the customer profile. And that exercise is extremely powerful, because you can go into deep detail as to who's buying your product versus an online store. When you can physically see, with the foot traffic, one person come in who's basically leading 3 or 4 people, whether it's a group of girls that are now coming in, and they're taking pictures of the tea, they're taking pictures of the drinks, they're taking pictures of this, they're taking pictures of that. It leads you to believe that, okay, we need to make our social media presence much more Instagram and TikTok friendly. We need to put more of our target avatar in our ads, like our UGC content, which is user generated content, started to completely blow up because we did those exact things. And we sat in the store and started to realize that Gen Z would bring their parents in. A Gen Z woman would bring her boyfriend in. And overall, we came to the conclusion that we just need to make it more friendly for women, because that's the audience that was actually bringing in the traffic indirectly. And then there was obviously millennials, but for the most part, that was a large percentage of the people that would interact with the social media posts as well. That led to more social media growth. So having a defined understanding of your target audience, especially in this day and age, if you're running an e-commerce store or all these other brands, you're going to have to really dial that in, because if it's not targeted or dialed into a certain extent, you're just going to be, you might be posting stuff on Instagram and TikTok and it's just falling on deaf ears, right? Especially on YouTube and other platforms where there's so much competition. It really needs to resonate with your target audience in terms of what they're consuming, their vernacular, and especially if you're running ads, because now Gen Z, right around 70% or 80%, trust brands more that showcase themselves, right, in the reviews or the testimonials before they make a purchasing decision. And it genuinely is multiple times more effective than a traditional review, right? A video, voiceover, and user-generated content, if you're not familiar with what that is, it's just you making a video about a product, and that product or company deciding to put that on their ads or their website does influence people's purchasing behavior. But overall, most people tend to underestimate just how much Gen Z's purchasing behavior has shifted compared to the previous generations of 10, 20 years ago, where these huge celebrities would come out onto these TV shows, and that stuff's still around. It's just losing effectiveness overall. It's not entirely dead, but if you're a business owner or an entrepreneur, you definitely have to be aware of the fact that you're going to miss out on a lot of opportunity if you're not resonating with the younger audience. And even from a political perspective, we're starting to see politicians that endorse or political endorsements actually lose efficiency when it comes to endorsing with celebrities, right? There's some celebrities that I believe they said was a 7% engagement rate. People voted, and there was a poll in terms of how many people felt like a political candidate influenced them, and it was anywhere from 10 to 7%. But if you're a content creator, or in this case, celebrity, and you say something negative, or you pick the wrong political side, or anything of that nature, it drastically affects how they view you. So it's a very high risk, low reward type of game now from a business perspective to invest in a celebrity or to deal with a celebrity. And it's not that these celebrities aren't making money. It's in order for them to now start making money and stay relevant. You can see with Kim Kardashian and all these other brands that they're trying so hard to be relatable. They're trying to bring streamers on. They're trying to get that younger generation, because that younger generation ultimately builds the trends. And that's where the money is, because indirectly they may not purchase the most, but they will set a trend that will influence Gen Alpha and then Gen X and the millennials and things of that nature. So it's very, very important to kind of dial in that side of your marketing strategy. If you're a business owner or an entrepreneur, or if you're a consumer, at least you're probably aware of the fact that it's definitely starting to phase out, because me, myself, I'm getting tired of this shit. So make sure you guys follow, like, and subscribe. I'm going to make another episode soon about some other stuff, so you guys can just tap in with me and help me get monetized, because I am trying to make money and prove this person wrong in a bet. So if you can help, that'd be great.